Welcome to Run with Purpose. This is episode number 132. And for those of you that are new to the show, my name is Flores, and I'm so very glad that you found this podcast. Would love if you would subscribe. As always, you can reach out to me on all the socials at flores.run. Hope everyone is having a great week. Hope you had a great long weekend. Hopefully you had a long weekend with Memorial Day. It's a important holiday to remember those that just sacrificed everything for us in this country. If you live in the U.S., you listen to this. If you don't, you have no idea what this is, and you think it's just Americans drinking Budweiser and smashing beer cans on their hands. But that's not the case at all. We really are thankful for those that have paid that ultimate price. And then even though Memorial Day isn't for current service members, still also thank you to all of those that are serving in all of our military. All I can say is thank you, but it's been a little bit of a break in the episodes. I've been doing lots of travel, lots of stuff for work, some things for fun as well. As you've probably seen some of that on the socials, maybe some of it not on the socials. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but recently did an interview with Jason on his podcast. I'll have a link in the show notes. You should have seen that on the socials as well. It was a really good conversation, really talking about journey and purpose. We specifically talked about the 50 states, but then just wrapped up of this whole idea of journey and purpose and our why and the same things that I talk about just in a different perspective. And it's always nice being on someone else's show to not feel like I have to run the things, right? I can just have these conversations and kind of just be myself and not feel like there's not that this is an agenda that I'm having to do, but there's a little more thought when it's my own show, right? And just being able to have that conversation with someone, learn a little bit more about someone. Hope to have Jason back on the show here soon. I think we looked when we were talking, I think it was like episode 5 or number 6 of Run with Purpose is where the last time he was on this show. So definitely to get him back on. Running wise, pre-training has been going well for the Chicago Marathon. Official training starts the second week of June. So really just working on getting those base miles in. Spending a little bit of time in the gym, not as much as I'd like. I really like to get back into that. But I am spending more time at the cycle class at work, and that's been a ton of fun. Very hard. It's crazy how like 30 minutes on a bike, I just go absolutely insane, sweating and just everything hurts afterwards. But I can go for a couple hour run and be perfectly fine. But hey, different muscle groups, spread it out. So it's been good. I hit a few group runs with Team World Vision, waiting though until they hit some longer distances. Their plan is really like a 26-week plan, spread out for people that may even walk most of the marathon. So the first weekend was like, I think it was like run 30 minutes or move for 30 minutes. It was like 15 minutes out, 15 minutes back. And I'm like, all right, for a Saturday run, I need a little bit longer than this. So once I hit some of those longer miles in the training, I'll probably be back out with the group. Hope to make it to downtown Chicago as well. There's a handful of World Vision groups in the Chicagoland area. Plan on checking some of those out just to see different areas and do different things. And kind of working along those lines, the city strides, which I've talked about before. I'm over 50% done with Wheeling, one of the 3 cities that I was hoping to finish this year around me. There's a lot of neighborhoods where I did like 1.5 neighborhoods and got like 48 streets because they have these like little cul-de-sacs and each output's another street. But oh well, that's how they classify it and do it. But I bring up the city strides because I want to shout out my buddy Goat. We'll just leave him at Goat. Everyone knows him as Goat, Rancid Goat. He finished Columbus, Ohio. It actually is the largest completed city on city strides now. Just over 11,000 streets, I think, or something like that. He's ranked like number 38 in the world on this app. And for perspective, he's run like 12,000 streets or something, and I've run 3,000. So he's definitely a little more geared on the running brand new streets and getting out there. But he has like a logistical background. He loved this stuff. I know I talked to him about this app. It's probably been 2 or 3 years ago now, and he really just hit it hard. And good for him. Congratulations to him. I know it's been all over socials. It's been on some local news stations as well, but just wanted to shout out Goat for that accomplishment because that is not easy. That's definitely more roads than I've ever run, obviously. And he's done it all in one city. So kudos, hopefully. I don't know what his next big city he's going to do or if he's just trying to get all of central Ohio. But today's topic is another introspective type one. A little while ago, I stumbled upon this video creator and writer. He was making these videos that he titled A Note to the Runners. And really, he's putting together these thoughts for an upcoming book. And his name's John Lynott. I'm probably pronouncing that last name wrong. And not only was it about what he was writing about and speaking about, it was also the style of how he told it was very inspiring to me. Sitting in a park or sitting in a public place, just holding a microphone, reading his thoughts. Not worried about an overproduced or overproductionalized video, really just bringing it down to the simple words that were being spoken. And outside of that, the message really seemed to hit home for me with just all of these things about notes to runners. The one in particular that I saw, and I'll have a link, I'm going to mention a handful of Instagram reels today. I'll have a link for all of those in the show notes so you can check them out. But one in particular was talking about finish lines. And he said, the finish line will come, as will the distractions. None of this will slow down. One day you will wish you were still out there. Don't wish for the finish line. And this finish line thought is always something that hits me just a little harder. I think with the whole 50-stage journey and hitting all of those finish lines and looking forward to those finish lines, right? I was striving so long, and I could see that in my sights, and then looking back, going, maybe I built it up just a little too much. Maybe I wasn't in the moment as much as I wanted to be. And then after watching that video, social media and the algorithms that come from it started feeding me more and more about finish and about the finish line and that sort of thing. Matt Johnson had this video, and at the end of it, he said he got to the finish line, tears and all, and after he just sat and felt nothing. No happiness or completion or relief. He thought he was chasing the finish line, but then realized he was actually chasing the process. He has this idea of being obsessed with doing the work rather than the why we were doing the work in general, or why the work in and of itself, right? We're obsessed with actually the doing, but we sometimes forget to take a step back and really look at the why. Matthew McConaughey had this thing, I believe it was Academy Awards or one of those things. He did a speech after he had won, and he said there's 3 things he needs in his life. It's something to look up to, something to look forward to, and something to chase. And when he talked about the thing he was chasing, he said he was chasing him in 10 years, knowing that he will never get there, but it keeps him with someone to keep on chasing. It's this idea of we'll never really reach a full finish line in the way that we think we will, other than death, right? We'll never reach the goal because there's always something else we should be striving for and going after. And these are just constant reminders to me about the process and chasing that process, understanding the why and prioritizing that over the finish line. And then came this interview with Jason, and I'm not going to recap the whole episode. You can take a listen to it again. Link will be in the show notes. But he asked me this great question that stuck with me, and he wanted to know what my message was that I learned through the journey, specifically on the 50-stage journey. What was my message that came across for me personally? I talked a little bit about how I impacted other people and how I helped people through their first marathons and those kinds of things. Like, those are their stories. What was your message through this journey? And I didn't have an answer. I kept thinking about it while we were talking, and I just didn't have anything. I don't even remember what I said there, but after the episode, it really started to make me think about the answer to that. And not just from a running aspect, but just all things in my life, understanding the message of this journey called life, right? What is the purpose that I'm driving towards, and how am I making an impact on that purpose? Long before I make it to the finish line, which I hope isn't anytime soon of dying, but long before I make it to that finish line, I can't determine when that's going to be. So what am I doing right now to make sure I'm living through that purpose? So with these thoughts, I decided to make a little note to myself, kind of a play on the note to the runners, taking a little bit from my Steal Like an Artist book, which is a great book for creatives if you haven't seen it. This idea of repurposing people's things, not stealing to take credit for their work, but acknowledging it and continuing to grow and make it better from a creative space. Highly recommend that book. But I took a look at what I've been doing this year with my word of perspective and how that builds to a greater idea of reflection through my notes, of if I'm giving myself a note and going that route. If you remember earlier in the year when I was talking about my goals, I talked about how I was going to be more intentional about journaling. And so far, it's been really great. I can tell the impact it has in my life, especially when I miss a day or two of it, going, hey, something just doesn't feel right. And then I circle back into that process, and it kind of helps me think about my thoughts in a way. It's not a Dear Diary or even a recap of my day. I actually switched. I used to do it at the end of the day and switched it to the beginning of the day to kind of start off my day with a different perspective. But it's really about getting my thoughts down in a bigger sense to use as a note for myself, just to think about where I possibly need to lean in more, where I need to be more present, more focused, where my attention maybe has been shifting to things that don't matter as much as I should be focusing on. And then even the opposite from a positive side of what is going well, where are my wins, where are my successes? I think it's so easy to get into that negative headspace where we're only thinking about the things that we're not doing well, and that's what we dwell on, but we really need to speak that positivity into our life, right? So where those shifts have taken place, and really the vulnerability to get those things down on paper, well, in electronic paper form, exactly. Left-handed writing, finding the Supernote was fantastic, being able to write there, but there's something that changed for me when I started writing things out other than typing. These podcast notes, my general ideas, I type those out, and mostly that's because I tried doing it handwritten and I can't read my own handwriting after I write it, especially when I'm kind of word vomiting here on my notes. I just did it the other day when I was prepping for this episode, wrote a bunch of things, and then Kayla's like, what's this episode about? I go, that's a great question. I need to figure out my thoughts of how I want this to come out. And so typing them out allows me to be a little more structured with it in a way. But when I'm doing these handwritten notes or just handwriting, there's a different aspect to it. Each pen stroke builds upon itself to form what's on my heart and my mind. And since writing takes a lot longer than typing, there's something about that fatigue in my hand while I'm writing long that just makes it feel more impactful. Have you ever felt that, like while you're writing or doing something, your hand starts to hurt? And maybe it's the crazy person in me that enjoys a little bit of pain to push through and get me out of that zone of comfort and really push into that discomfort. But writing it all down makes me chew on each word just a little bit more. The writing for me is more about my personal journey, but there's still something heavy about the words. I'm choosing each word carefully as like I said, each stroke of the pen to form each letter, to form each word. I'm being intentional with those, knowing that, for lack of a better way of putting it, the space is limited. I just have my page. What can I do on this page? So many of these notes are just reminders to myself. Reminders of where I've been, or maybe where I'm heading, or maybe where I want to shift direction. And I've talked about this process of assessing your why to know where you're heading. And when we leave these reminders for ourselves, we're keeping that fresh in our minds. This idea that where our thoughts are, our actions will follow, as I said a little bit earlier, of remembering those positive reminders. If we keep our thoughts and focused on those positives and we keep telling ourselves those positives, we will drift in that direction. We'll start moving towards the positivity that we want to be. But obviously the opposite is true as well, where if we just speak negative to ourselves or only consume negative thoughts, we'll end up following suit and kind of falling into that path where all it really was a changing of how we speak about ourselves and how we see ourselves. And in this way, how I write about the feelings that I have. Where is the perspective that I'm coming from? What's the point of view that I'm looking at? What lens am I going through, right? That will change or shape the way that I think about these things. So really the notes to myself serve as a reflection, just like the thoughts of the finish line and how Josh put it. Now I just realized, I think I called him John earlier on. His name's Josh. We'll post it and we'll fix it, and that is what it is. But just like the finish line and how he put this, none of this is going to slow down. And one day we're going to wish we were still out there. And taking a moment about all that has taken place to get me to this moment, to this specific point in time. The people, the decisions, the trials, the success, everything has led up to this. And these notes to myself can shift the focus onto gratitude, knowing all the things that had happened to get here. Again, taking that positive road, not the negative things that brought me here. What's the positive things? Where can I show my gratitude that got me to the place that I am now? And I think that's one of the toughest things with the 50 state journey as I look back on it, is just the amount of people that were involved, right? The sacrifice from my family to say that we were using every vacation to do another race or two, or friends that spent their weekends on the road or on the trail while we trained together. There's no amount of thank yous I could ever show how much all of that time meant. And it just really just feels like a debt that I'm not able to pay back. And I've tried working on my final post. Gosh, it's been a handful of times now I've started the idea of writing it, and I just can't figure out how to get it started because the journey was just a lot. There's a lot to it. And Kaylee gives me crap for this all the time. I'll be working on schoolwork or any other type of writing, and I just can't figure out how to get started. Once I get started, I can go through that process and I can make things happen. But to me, the start is so important. And I think this is where this journaling and note-taking thing has kind of shifted my mindset. Again, bringing things to the morning, to write in the morning. The way I started is so important. So many times I'm just staring at that blank page and going, what is this? What do I want to set myself up for today? What do I want to set myself up for today? Up for today? Yeah, 2 4s. And how am I going to shape the day based off of that thought? If we look at things from a positive light and speak to ourselves that way, we can set ourselves up for success in those moments. But I know it's not always rainbows and butterflies, and there is a critical aspect of it to be like, hey, maybe I do need to shift. But doing so with a positivity of saying, similar like the failure aspect, right? Of like, what am I learning through this moment? Something happened. What am I learning through it? And how can I continue to improve after the fact? It's the same type of concept. So as I've been working through writing that final post, it's just been a struggle to figure out how it's going to start. And Jason and I talked about this too, of this idea, maybe I need to work on writing that book. Just to the blog post isn't going to cover everything, but maybe that's something I start at the end of this year. But with these types of reflections, I'm really leaving myself breadcrumbs of notes. And we all have these ups and downs, and being able to reflect on the truth of the matter allows us to have a firmer foundation in what the truth is, right? As we reflect on that foundation of what is actually true, and we build upon that. Again, speaking positivity and keep moving forward, not just excusing the things we do and making excuses for that. We talked about that last episode with excuses, but really understanding where we're coming from and how we can continue to grow and get better in whatever the aspect is. Not getting down on ourselves, but figuring out how we can lift ourselves up. So what about you? What kind of notes do you leave for yourself? What are you telling yourself in the day to day? Are you reminding yourself of where you've been, showing gratitude in the situations that got you there? Or are you looking towards a negative light and finding all of the people that got you where you are today, saying that it's because of them that this happened, instead of taking the responsibility of what part did I possibly play in this? How can I be a part of the solution instead of soaking in the problem? For years, I didn't really understand the purpose of journaling. I'm like, why do people want to get down their thoughts? But I've come to appreciate it more and more as I write. It started with journaling, and now I'm writing some more poems and just short thought processes and making videos and doing those things, which I may or may not share in the future. But really in this time, I've come to appreciate it. It gives me a daily reminder of why I'm doing the things I'm doing, why I'm focusing on the things that I'm focusing on, why I'm putting my perspective where this perspective is, to really understand what's important to me. It puts into reality where I can look back and say, hey, you are doing what you said is important. Every day you're writing this down and you're saying, this is where I want to spend my focus. And the next day I can look at it and go, no, I didn't. Or yes, I did. Either way, how can I continue to improve on it? How can I continue to get better and not just get sucked into just the monotony of this is the next step? They actually brought it up. Our pastor today in our church service talked about this idea of it's so often that when we are in our highest, that's when we're most vulnerable, because we have this momentum and it just takes one thing to switch us off. And we so often can be blind to those things when we're at our highs. So even when the high in the positivity, we need to be paying attention to how can I stay here? How can I continue to move forward and keep this momentum going instead of going back into old ways where you fall off the wagon in a way, right? How do I lean into that? And when I look at these notes to myself, I want to be able to see that journey. I want to see that growth. I want to see the valleys and how I reacted in those valleys. And I want to see the peaks and see how I reacted in those peaks as well. It's really about the process that has gotten me to where I am. And I don't want to lose sight of the process as a part of the bigger picture. The finish line is eventually going to come. And all the while, I'm going to wish I was back out there. But may my purpose live longer than me. You reach out to me on social media everywhere at flores.run. Subscribe, leave a review for the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. Remember to keep running with purpose, one step at a time. See you guys next week.